A millionaire shaved a black maid's head in front of Manhattan's elite, laughing as clippers buzzed against her scalp while guests filmed the spectacle. Then the dining hall doors opened, and a tattooed man stepped inside a man whose presence turned laughter into silence. What the room didn't know, that was her father. And he doesn't forgive. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. This one's going to hit different. Hit that subscribe button because you need to see how this ends. Mary Forrest's hands were trembling. She'd been on her feet for 9 hours straight at the Carlton Rose dining hall, serving champagne and coursed meals to New York's wealthiest power players at some tech mogul's exclusive networking dinner. Her black uniform was crisp, her natural hair pulled into a careful bun, her expression professional despite exhaustion carving through her bones. She was 19, working double shifts to save money for community college. Tonight's event meant an extra $400 in tips she desperately needed for tuition. Just a few more hours. Just get through the night. Table 7 needed refills. 8 men in custom suits, their voices loud with bourbon and entitlement, their laughter sharp with cruelty. She recognized the man at the head of the table from Forbes covers and business news segments. Johnny Mills, 36, founder of Mills Capital Group, worth over $1 billion, notorious for his aggressive business tactics and even more aggressive ego. Mary approached carefully, water pitcher balanced perfectly in her practiced grip despite the fatigue weighing her down. Mr. Mills shoved his empty glass toward her without looking up from his phone, treating her like furniture, like she didn't exist as a human being. She poured carefully, the clear liquid streaming smoothly until someone at the table slapped the back of another guest's chair while telling a crude joke. The impact jolted the table, water splashed over the rim, cascading across Johnny Mills' designer suit, soaking through Italian fabric, through silk, through his fury. The table went silent. The string quartet in the corner seemed to stop mid-note. "Are you kidding me?" Johnny exploded to his feet, his face flushed with rage and alcohol. "Do you have any idea what this suit costs? $12,000. 12,000. Mary's hands shook as she grabbed cloth napkins. "Sir, I'm so sorry. It was an accident. Let me help." "An accident?" Johnny's voice boomed across the dining hall. Conversations died. Crystal glasses paused mid-air. 200 eyes turned toward the commotion. "You just destroyed $12,000 because you're too incompetent to hold a pitcher steady." "Sir, please, I'll get the manager. I'll pay for dry cleaning." "You'll pay for dry cleaning?" Johnny grabbed her wrist, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. "With what? Your minimum wage paycheck? Your pathetic tips?" His friends were laughing now, phones emerging from pockets, recording, capturing Mary's humiliation for their entertainment, for their group chats, for their sick sense of amusement. Tears burned Mary's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here, not in front of them. I'll work extra shifts, whatever it takes. I'm sorry." "You're not sorry enough." Johnny's smile turned vicious. "Someone bring me clippers. Now." Mary's blood turned to ice. "What?" "I said, bring me clippers," Johnny roared. "This incompetent girl needs to learn what happens when you disrespect your superiors." "Mr. Mills, please." Mary tried to pull away, but his grip was iron, bruising, trapping. "This isn't necessary." A server appeared from the kitchen with hair clippers, his face pale, his hands shaking as he handed them over. Nobody stopped it. Nobody intervened. They just watched, waiting for the show. Johnny grabbed the clippers and yanked Mary into the center of the room by her uniform collar. "Let's see how you look without all that hair." "No, please, I'm sorry." Mary's voice broke as she tried to twist away, but Johnny's other hand fisted in her carefully styled bun, yanking her head back violently. "Too late for sorry," he sneered, and the clippers roared to life. The buzzing sound filled the silent hall like a scream. Johnny dragged the clippers across Mary's scalp, not carefully, not gently, just hacking through her hair in jagged, brutal strokes. Long coils of black hair tumbled to the marble floor like fallen pieces of her dignity. Mary felt each pass like a physical wound, her identity being stripped away section by section, while 200 people watched and recorded and did nothing. Tears streamed down her face as the hair she'd been growing since childhood fell around her feet in terrible piles. Johnny laughed the entire time, performing for his audience, for the cameras, for the pure cruelty of it. "There," he said finally, releasing her so roughly she stumbled. "Now we're even. Your hair for my suit. Fair trade." Mary stood frozen, her hands flying to her head, feeling the uneven patches, the exposed scalp, the shame burning through her like poison. The room was silent except for suppressed laughter and the relentless clicking of phone cameras. She wanted to disappear, wanted to run, wanted to. The massive entrance doors opened. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. A man stepped into the hall, and the energy shifted instantly, like someone had sucked all the oxygen from the room. He wore a black coat over a dark suit, intricate tattoos visible on his neck and creeping up toward his face, his presence filling the entire space without him saying a single word. He moved with the kind of quiet, dangerous power that made billionaires step aside instinctively, that made security guards freeze mid-breath, that made the air itself feel heavier, colder, lethal. Mary's breath stopped. Bruno, her father, he walked forward slowly, deliberately, his dark eyes scanning the room until they locked onto her tears, onto her destroyed hair, onto Johnny Mills still holding the clippers, still smiling. For 5 seconds, nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Then Bruno Forrest crossed the dining hall floor, his footsteps echoing on marble like a countdown, and the crowd parted like prey scattering before a predator, instinct screaming at them to get out of his way. When he reached Mary, he didn't speak, just removed his coat with careful, controlled movements and draped it over her shaking shoulders, covering her, protecting her, claiming her. "Breathe, sweetheart," Bruno said softly, his voice gentle in a way that made the gentleness more terrifying. He guided her behind him with one hand, placing his body between her and Johnny like an unbreakable wall. Then he turned to face Johnny Mills, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "You just made a mistake," Bruno said quietly. His voice didn't need to rise. The threat was carved into every syllable. Johnny's cocky smile faltered. "Look, man, I don't know who you think you are, but this maid—" "She's not a maid," Bruno interrupted, his tone still soft, still deadly. "She's my daughter." The room collectively inhaled. Johnny's face went white, and Bruno Forrest smiled a smile that promised devastation. But to understand what happened next, you need to understand who Bruno Forrest is, and why even men who control billions have learned to fear his name. Johnny's laugh came out strangled, forced. "Your daughter? Come on, man, she works here. She's just trying to get out of—" Bruno's eyes didn't blink, didn't shift. The silence that followed was suffocating. Johnny's smile died on his lips. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the dining hall's climate control. "Look, it was just— she ruined my suit. I was teaching her." "Teaching her?" Bruno's voice remained quiet, but something in it made guests flinch. He reached up and wiped the tears from Mary's cheeks with his thumb, the gesture impossibly gentle from a man whose mere presence radiated violence. "You taught my 9-year-old daughter humiliation in front of cameras, for entertainment." Chairs scraped against marble. Guests were moving now, slowly at first, then faster. Designer purses grabbed, phones slipped into pockets. The exits suddenly became very appealing. Nobody wanted to be a witness to whatever was about to happen. "She spilled water on me." Johnny's voice pitched higher, desperation creeping in. "It was an accident, but she needed to understand consequences." "Consequences." Bruno tasted the word. "Yes, let's discuss those." He took one step forward. Johnny took 2 back. "Richard," Bruno said, his voice carrying across the hall without rising in volume. The dining hall manager appeared instantly, his face pale, his hands clasped like a prayer. "Yes, Mr. Forrest? The room went colder. Even the staff knew who Bruno Forrest was. How long has my daughter worked here? Bruno asked. 6 months, sir. She's one of our most reliable. And you allowed this? Bruno gestured toward Mary's destroyed hair, toward Johnny, toward the phones that had recorded everything. Sir, I didn't, I wasn't. Richard's voice cracked. It happened so fast. Remove him. Bruno's words were surgical, precise, not a request, a command. Sir? Richard hesitated only a heartbeat. Remove him from this building. Security guards materialized, the same ones who'd stood frozen during Mary's assault. They moved toward Johnny with mechanical efficiency. Wait, you can't, I paid for this event. Johnny backed toward the wall, looking for allies. His friends had vanished. His table was empty. This is my networking dinner. I paid for... Your money means nothing here, Bruno said simply. Not anymore. The guards gripped Johnny's arms. He struggled, but their hold was absolute. You're making a huge mistake, Johnny shouted as they dragged him toward the exit. Do you know who I am? I'll sue. I'll destroy this place. His threats echoed down the corridor until the doors muffled them into nothing. Bruno turned back to Mary, who stood trembling in his coat, her hands still touching her ruined hair. He lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing, like she was 5 years old again instead of 19. Dad, Mary's voice broke. Shh, Bruno murmured against her head. I've got you. He carried her toward the exit, past frozen guests, past terrified staff, past the scattered remains of her hair on the floor. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at the silent room, at the people who'd watched, who'd filmed, who'd laughed. He will pay, Bruno said quietly, and everyone believed him. Bruno's penthouse overlooked Manhattan like a kingdom he'd conquered. Mary sat on the leather sofa, wrapped in his coat, her hands still trembling as she touched the jagged patches of her scalp. He said, her voice fractured, he said I was incompetent, that I needed to learn my place. Bruno knelt before her, his tattooed hands carefully examining her head, checking for cuts. His fingers were gentle, impossibly gentle, for a man who'd broken bones with those same hands. Did he hurt you anywhere else? His voice was soft, controlled. Mary shook her head, then the tears came in waves. Bruno pulled her against his chest, letting her sob into his shirt while he stroked her back like he used to when she was small. When she was 5 and her mother died in a car accident, Bruno had held her exactly like this. A man feared by half of New York's underworld, cradling a grieving child who didn't understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. He'd raised her alone after that, kept her away from his world, the violence, the territory wars, the blood that paid for her private tutors and safe neighborhood. She'd grown up knowing her father was different, powerful, dangerous. But to her, he was just Dad, the man who braided her hair before school, who checked her homework, who scared away bullies with a single phone call. I just wanted normal, Mary whispered. A normal job, normal life. Bruno remembered that conversation 6 months ago. Mary insisting she didn't want money from his accounts, didn't want connections from his network. She wanted to earn her own way. He'd hated the idea his daughter serving people who didn't deserve to breathe her air. But she'd been so determined, so desperate to prove she could exist outside his shadow. So he'd agreed, reluctantly, against every instinct. And tonight, he'd seen what the normal world did to people without power. You are not normal, sweetheart, Bruno said quietly, pulling back to look at her. You are a forest, and nobody humiliates a forest without consequence. He stood, pulling his phone from his pocket. Mary watched as her father transformed the gentle parent, disappearing behind the man who controlled territory from Brooklyn to Queens. Vincent, the Mills situation, I want everything. Pause. No, not later. Now. His tone carried finality. Accounts, properties, partnerships, licenses. Find the pressure points. Another call. Marcus. Footage from Carlton Rose tonight. Make sure it spreads. Every platform, every news outlet. Another. Judge Brennan. I'm calling in Milwaukee. Yes, tonight. Mary listened to her father dismantle a billionaire's life in 3-minute intervals, his voice never rising, never threatening, just stating facts, making arrangements, activating a network she'd always known existed but never truly witnessed. Across the city, Johnny Mills's phone began ringing, first his lawyer, then his accountant, then his business partners. His bank accounts showed pending freezes, his permits were flagged for review. The video was already trending with 50,000 views and climbing. Bruno ended his final call and sat beside Mary. "He will pay for every tear," he promised, "and when I'm done, he'll wish he never learned your name." Johnny Mills woke at 7 a.m. in his Tribeca penthouse with a mild hangover and zero concern. So he'd gotten rough with some maid. So people filmed it. By next week, nobody would remember. The internet's attention span lasted 3 days maximum. He scrolled through his phone over espresso, a few angry tweets, some Reddit threads calling him entitled. Nothing his PR team couldn't bury with a carefully worded apology and a charitable donation. By 9 a.m., he was showered, suited, ready to dominate another day. By noon, his world was collapsing. "What do you mean, frozen?" Johnny stared at his phone, his accountant's panicked voice barely registering. "My business accounts can't just freeze. All of them, Mr. Mills. Wells Fargo, Chase, even your offshore holdings. They're citing suspicious activity flags, pending federal review." "That's impossible. I haven't." His assistant burst into his office. "Mr. Mills, the permits for the Hudson Tower project, they've been delayed indefinitely. City inspector's office won't give a reason." Johnny's jaw tightened. "Get our lawyer on it. Now." His phone exploded with notifications. Not tweets anymore. News alerts. "Millionaire assaults black server in shocking viral video. Johnny Mills caught on camera shaving woman's head for fun." The footage was everywhere. Not grainy phone clips, crystal clear angles from multiple perspectives. Professional editing. Strategic hashtags already trending. Number justice for Mary, number millionaire bully, number Carlton Rose shame. 3 million views in 6 hours. His PR director called, voice shrill with panic. "Johnny, we have a situation. Investors are pulling meetings. Board source is requesting an emergency review. Your keynote at the tech summit, they've uninvited you." "Fix it." Johnny slammed his fist on his desk. "That's what I pay you for." "I can't fix this. Every outlet wants a statement. Protesters are gathering outside Mills Capital. Your face is on every platform." Another call, his largest investor. "Johnny, we need to discuss distancing strategies." Then his primary contractor. "Mr. Mills, given the current climate," then his marketing partners, his board members, his sponsors, everyone jumping ship within hours. Johnny stood at his office window, watching news vans assemble below. This wasn't normal backlash. This was coordinated, surgical. Someone with serious power was orchestrating his destruction. But who? That maid was nobody. She couldn't. His junior associate entered quietly, hesitant. "Sir, there's a rumor circulating." "What rumor?" Johnny snapped. The young man swallowed hard. "The girl you shaved, Mary. People are saying." He lowered his voice to a whisper, like speaking the words too loudly would summon something terrible. "They're saying her father is Bruno Forrest." The name hit Johnny like a physical blow. Bruno Forrest, the tattooed man from the dining hall, the one who'd carried her out, the one whose presence had made millionaires scatter like roaches. Johnny's blood turned to ice. Bruno Forrest didn't just have connections. He was the connection. The man politicians feared, the man who made problems disappear, the man who... Johnny's hands started shaking. He hadn't humiliated some random maid. He'd humiliated a mob enforcer's daughter. On camera, in front of witnesses. "Oh God," Johnny whispered. His phone rang again. "Unknown number," he answered with trembling fingers. A voice, cold and precise. "Mr. Mills, we need to talk about restitution." The line went dead. Johnny Mills realized he wasn't just losing his empire, he was being hunted. Judge Brennan met Bruno at a private club in Midtown at 2 a.m. No handshake, no small talk. "The audit?" Bruno asked. "IRS will receive an anonymous tip tomorrow morning. Mills Capital's tax filings from the past 7 years." Brennan slid a folder across the table. "Offshore discrepancies. Shell company irregularities. Enough to keep him buried in litigation for years." Bruno nodded. "Appreciated. We're even now, Forrest. We're even." By dawn, Bruno had met with 4 more people. District Attorney Chen, who owed Bruno for a campaign contribution that had saved her election. Union boss Martinez, who controlled every construction worker in 3 boroughs. Investigative journalist Sarah Reeves, who'd been searching for her next explosive story. City Inspector Dominguez, who'd been on Bruno's payroll for a decade. Each conversation was brief, transactional, surgical. By 10 a.m., the cascade began. An anonymous whistleblower contacted the Department of Labor about Mills Capital's unpaid overtime violations, discriminatory hiring practices, and unsafe working conditions. Evidence included internal memos, payroll discrepancies, witness testimonies from 12 former employees who suddenly felt safe enough to speak. By 1 p.m., 3 of Johnny's shell companies, ones he'd used to hide assets and funnel investments, collapsed overnight when their partners mysteriously withdrew funding. Partners who received very specific phone calls from very specific people. By 3 p.m., City Inspector Dominguez arrived at the Mills Grand Hotel, Johnny's flagship property, and discovered critical health code violations, structural permit issues, and zoning discrepancies that required immediate closure. Police tape went up. Guests were evacuated. News cameras captured everything. By 5 p.m., the IRS audit was officially launched. Mary watched it all unfold from Bruno's penthouse, news coverage streaming on 3 different screens. Each report felt like watching a building demolished floor by floor, methodical, inevitable, terrifying. "Is this," Mary's voice was small, "is this all because of me?" Bruno sat beside her, his presence grounding. "This is because of him. I'm simply revealing who he always was. But you're destroying his entire life. He destroyed your dignity in front of hundreds, on camera, for entertainment." Bruno's voice remained calm, factual. "I'm not touching him, Mary. I'm not threatening him. I'm simply removing the protections he thought wealth provided." Mary watched another news segment. Johnny Mills shouting at reporters, his face red, his desperation visible. "You're scaring me a little," she admitted. Bruno turned to face her, his tattooed features softening. "Power is not violence, sweetheart. Violence is what weak men use when they have nothing else. Power is consequences. Power is making someone realize that every action has weight, every cruelty has a price." "And his price?" "Everything he used to hurt you. His money, his reputation, his freedom." Bruno's eyes held hers. "He humiliated you publicly, so the world will watch him fall publicly. That's justice." Mary looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "What if he apologizes?" Bruno's expression didn't change. "Then he'll apologize from a courtroom." Outside, Johnny Mills' empire continued crumbling, one calculated strike at a time. Johnny Mills lost $47 million on Wednesday. Not over weeks, over 8 hours. Investors dumped shares. Partners invoked emergency clauses. Credit lines evaporated. Assets froze faster than his lawyers could file motions. By Thursday morning, his office was empty. His VP of operations resigned via email. His CFO disappeared to the Cayman Islands. His entire executive team scattered like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Nobody wanted their name attached to his anymore. The call from his father came Thursday afternoon. "You've embarrassed this family," Senator Richard Mills said, his voice cold as January. "Your mother is humiliated. My colleagues won't return my calls. Dad, I need help. You're 46 years old. You shaved a teenage girl's head on camera for entertainment. What help could you possibly deserve? Please." My attorneys are drafting a public statement disavowing your actions. Do not contact me again. You are not my son." The line went dead. Johnny sat alone in his penthouse, the one asset they hadn't seized yet, staring at his phone. No allies, no family, no options. His lawyer, Davidson, arrived at 6 p.m., looking 20 years older than last week. "How bad?" Johnny asked. "Criminal charges filed this morning. Assault, false imprisonment, civil rights violations. The DA is pushing hard. Someone's putting pressure from above." Davidson dropped a briefcase on the table. "Your assets are bleeding. You've got maybe 72 hours before total collapse. So what do I do?" Davidson exhaled slowly. "There's one play. Probably won't work, but it's all you have." "What?" "Find the girl, Mary Forrest. Apologize. Publicly, privately, whatever it takes. If her father accepts, and that's a massive if, maybe he calls off the dogs." Johnny's stomach twisted. "Bruno Forrest. The man who's currently dismantling your life with phone calls." Davidson stood. "Grovel, beg, offer restitution. It's your only shot at survival." Finding Bruno Forrest's headquarters required bribes, desperation, and a taxi driver who knew better than to ask questions. The warehouse in Red Hook looked abandoned from outside. Inside, it was a fortress. Johnny stood at the reinforced door, his hands shaking, his suit wrinkled for the first time in his adult life. Two men in dark clothing watched him from the shadows. "I need to speak with Bruno Forrest," Johnny said, voice cracking. "Please, it's about his daughter. I want to apologize." One guard spoke into a radio, waited, listened. The door unlocked. "He'll see you." Johnny stepped inside, his heart hammering. The warehouse interior was surprisingly refined, exposed brick, modern furniture, art that probably cost more than his car. Bruno Forrest sat behind a desk in the center of the space, his tattooed hands folded, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Mills," Bruno said quietly, "you wanted to talk about my daughter." Johnny swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was drunk. I was stupid. I made a terrible mistake." Bruno gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Johnny sat, hope flickering despite the dread coiling in his stomach. Maybe, just maybe, this could be fixed. Bruno smiled, and Johnny realized he'd just walked into something far worse than destruction. He'd walked into judgment. Bruno poured 2 glasses of whiskey, expensive, amber, the kind Johnny used to drink in victory. He slid 1 glass across the polished desk, just far enough that Johnny would have to reach. To ask permission. Johnny's hand extended. Stopped. He pulled back. "Smart," Bruno said, taking a slow sip from his own glass. "You're learning." He opened a leather folder, spreading documents across the desk like playing cards. Johnny's eyes darted across the pages, his face draining of color with each one. Lawsuits filed Monday morning. 12 former employees claiming workplace abuse and discrimination. Your pattern, not just Mary. Bruno tapped another document. Witness statements from Carlton Rose. 43 guests willing to testify about what they saw, what they filmed. Johnny's breathing accelerated. Your accounts frozen pending federal investigation. Your properties flagged for permit violations. Your partnerships dissolved. Bruno slid forward photos. IRS agents entering Mills' capital, protesters outside his hotels, news crews documenting every angle of his collapse. "This isn't negotiation, Mr. Mills. This is a tour of your ruins." "Please," Johnny's voice broke. "I'll pay anything. Restitution, therapy for Mary, public apology. I'll liquidate everything." "Everything's already gone." Johnny's hands shook violently. "Then what do you want? Tell me how to fix this." "You can't." Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Johnny turned. Mary descended slowly, her head now completely shaved, not jagged patches from his clippers, but clean, deliberate, shining under the warehouse lights. She wore Bruno's oversized hoodie, her face calm, her eyes steady. She looked powerful. Johnny scrambled to his feet. "Mary, I'm so sorry. I was drunk and cruel. And why did you think it was funny?" Her voice was quiet but cut through his rambling like a blade. Johnny froze. "What? When you were shaving my head, when I was crying, when everyone was filming?" Mary stepped closer, and Johnny instinctively backed against the desk. "You were laughing." They were all laughing. "Why was my humiliation funny to you?" Johnny opened his mouth, closed it. No words came, because there was no answer, no justification, no excuse that wouldn't reveal exactly what he was, a man who'd found entertainment in cruelty, power in degradation. Johnny's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know." Mary stared at him for 5 long seconds, then turned to her father. "I'm done here." Bruno stood, buttoning his coat. "Mr. Mills, let me walk you out." "Wait, that's it? What happens now?" "You'll see." Bruno guided Johnny toward the exit, his hand firm on Johnny's shoulder. Not violent, just inescapable. The warehouse door opened to flashing lights. Police cruisers, news cameras, reporters shouting questions. Officers stepped forward with handcuffs. "Johnny Mills, you're under arrest for assault, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations." "No, wait." Johnny struggled as metal closed around his wrists. Cameras captured everything, his terror, his tears, his complete destruction broadcast to the same world that had watched him destroy Mary. Bruno leaned close, his whisper audible only to Johnny beneath the chaos. "Now you understand humiliation." Then he stepped back into the shadows, leaving Johnny to face the lights alone. The trial lasted 3 days. It should have taken weeks, but the evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses eager, and the judge had no patience for delay. Day 1. The prosecution played the video. In the courtroom's silence, every sound amplified the buzzing clippers, Mary's pleas, Johnny's laughter, the crowd's cruel amusement. Jurors watched with horror. Several looked away. One wiped tears. Johnny sat rigid at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide how small he'd become. Day 2. Witnesses testified. Guests from Carlton Rose who'd finally found their conscience. Staff members who'd endured Johnny's abuse for years. Former employees who described a pattern of cruelty disguised as corporate culture. The defense had nothing. No character witnesses, no one willing to defend him. Day 3. Mary took the stand. She wore a simple black dress, her shaved head held high. Bruno sat in the front row, his presence a silent anchor. "Miss Forrest," the prosecutor began gently, "can you describe what you felt that night?" Mary's voice was steady. "I felt invisible, like I wasn't human to him, just an object he could destroy for entertainment. He didn't just cut my hair. He cut away my dignity in front of people who could have stopped him, but chose to watch instead." "What frightened you most?" "That no one helped. That wealth made him believe he was entitled to humiliate me. That I was supposed to accept it because I was serving him." Mary's eyes found Johnny. "He treated me like I was nothing because I was working class, black, and powerless. But I'm not nothing. And I wasn't powerless, I just didn't know it yet." The courtroom was silent. "Thank you, Miss Forrest," the prosecutor said softly. The defense attorney approached for cross-examination, took one look at Mary's calm, powerful presence, and said, "No questions, Your Honor." Johnny's lawyer attempted a closing argument about mistakes, intoxication, momentary lapses in judgment. It landed like a stone in water, heavy, sinking, irrelevant. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty on all charges. Judge Morrison removed her glasses, her expression carved from granite. "Mr. Mills, your actions represent dehumanizing cruelty, a demonstration that wealth does not grant permission to brutalize others. You violated Miss Forrest's dignity, her bodily autonomy, and her civil rights for your own amusement." Johnny sobbed openly, his face buried in his hands. "I sentence you to 2 years in state prison, $1.5 million in restitution to Miss Forrest. A public apology to be broadcast across all platforms where the assault was shared, and 400 hours of community service upon release." The gavel struck. This court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Mary walked down the steps with her father beside her, his hand wrapped around hers. Reporters shouted questions. Protesters cheered. Justice had been public, complete, undeniable. Bruno squeezed her hand once. Mary squeezed back. They walked through the crowd together, a daughter who'd found her strength, and a father who'd taught her that power without compassion is tyranny, but power with purpose is justice. 6 months after the trial, Mary Forrest stood before a conference room of labor organizers, her shaved head grown into a close-cropped fade that had become her signature. Photographers called it iconic. She called it survival, transformed into strength. Workplace abuse thrives in silence, she told the room, her voice clear and unwavering. I stayed silent until I couldn't anymore. Until someone shaved my head for entertainment while people filmed instead of helping. We're here to make sure no worker ever feels that powerless again. Applause filled the space. Mary smiled, genuine, confident, nothing like the trembling girl from Carlton Rose. She'd become the face of the Forrest Foundation's Worker Protection Initiative, Bruno's legitimate network of legal aid, advocacy groups, and emergency resources for exploited employees. Her testimony had inspired hundreds to come forward with their own stories. Her name meant something now, not victim, but advocate. Bruno watched from the back of the room, his tattooed presence drawing curious glances. He attended every speech, every foundation meeting, standing silently while his daughter commanded spaces he'd once controlled through fear. He was trying, stepping back from the violence that had defined his empire for decades, channeling power into protection instead of punishment. Some habits died hard. He still made calls, still held influence, but Mary was teaching him what she'd learned in the hardest way possible, that true strength comes from lifting others, not destroying enemies. After the meeting, they walked through Brooklyn together, father and daughter, her hand tucked into his arm. You're proud, Mary observed, glancing up at him. Terrified, Bruno corrected. You're becoming someone the world will listen to. That brings attention, danger. You taught me how to handle both. They stopped at a small park, the city humming around them. Mary placed her hand over Bruno's tattooed knuckles, the same hands that had wiped her tears, destroyed her abuser, and built something better from the ashes. You protected me, Mary said softly. Now I want to protect others. Not the way you did. I'm not built for that world, but in my own way, through law, advocacy, truth. Bruno looked at his daughter, 19 years old, shaved head gleaming in the afternoon sun, eyes fierce with purpose he'd tried to shield her from and inadvertently given her. He smiled, rare, soft, the expression of a father watching his child become exactly who she was meant to be. Then the Forrest legacy is in good hands. Mary leaned against his shoulder, and they stood together in comfortable silence, a man who'd ruled through fear, learning to build through love, and a woman who'd survived humiliation, becoming an architect of justice. Justice didn't walk into the Carlton Rose that night. It stormed in wearing tattoos and a tailored coat.